beautiful souls out there, and I hope you're able to get out in nature like Starlight is. And you gotta ignore the background, because where I am, no matter where I sit, there's gonna be cars somewhere in the background, so I hope that's not too much of a distraction now. Anyway, if you are new to my YouTube channel, welcome, and you can find me on YouTube, and that is at Starlight, and that is Kathy with a K Dingman. Plus, you could give my videos a thumbs up, and you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. Plus, don't forget, you can leave me a message down below, beep, 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 and you could share my videos with your family, your friends. A dragonfly and a wolf. Ooh. Not only you could share my videos with those animals, you can also don't forget about leaving, don't forget to push the notification bell so that way you don't miss any videos. And I'm so sorry, I'm doing everything in a different order. Plus, if you would love, you can send love donations to Starlight, and I will have that information here. Ping. Starlight hasn't eaten yet, that's why. Starlight can't think until after she gets done eating. So anyway, today's kind of gonna be a fun topic, because I see stuff, we all see stuff out in public somewhere, but because I'm a YouTube creator, I am here to help out parents or even grandparents, because really, in my case, it's a lot different. I would love to be with my grandkids all the time, but I'm on a mission with the universe, with God, so my situation is so different. And as a grandparent, it can be challenging, you know, having grandkids anyway. So this video, the title is "You Have 10 More Minutes." That is the title for this video. And I just witnessed this at the library last night when I was there doing my stuff. So, and it brought back memories, you know, not so much of my daughter, but of my son. And I love my kids no matter what, you know. These are things that, you know, most parents do go through. So it's about you have 10 more minutes. And now, because today is a whole lot different than it was when my kids were little, you know, my kids actually were way behind when it came to technology and cell phones. But we did, at the end, my daughter was not in the picture, so my daughter, I kind of have to, you know, she was not there during this time. But it was my son and my stepson when we first got a computer. And in those days, Starlight wasn't even allowed to watch any TV. So it was amazing that we were getting computers for homeschooling. That was the whole reason, because they had tutors on the programs. And then time went by, Starlight escaped the cult church. My son and I ended up, it took a long time, it didn't happen overnight. We finally got our first, actually it wasn't our first place, it was the second place that we ended up renting out, and it was a beautiful 2-bedroom house out in nature, out in about only 10 minutes away from town. It was super place, and a beautiful private little spot, you know. So I was a happy little pea in a pod in that place, because it was perfect for myself and my son. In those days, my son, because we came from this church, a cult church, we weren't allowed to listen to music, we weren't allowed to watch TV, and as time went by, we started watching movies. Boy, did we ever start watching movies. And then video games started out, you know. So my son, you know, which my son played, well, my son didn't play video games when he was younger because he was too young, but now he's grown up, you know, and so it's kind of like first time for my son to have video games. And so this is what this video is about, is for parents with cell phones, computers, video games, or whatever. It doesn't have to be those three things, or whatever technology that you might use. It's about helping parents you know, when when you want the children to get off the technology, like, you got to go somewhere and they're playing a video game. So I learned on my own when I had my son is, I had to learn the hard way. Is at first I didn't know what I was doing because it was all new to us, and so I realized, oh shit, he's on the playing a video game too long. So I had to teach him about responsibilities, to go along with the video games, and so I'm not sure what age my son was. So he might have been like 16, 17, somewhere 18, somewhere in that area when we lived at this house. So he was at, that age. And do I have a problem with video games? Not really. There's I do and I don't. It's how much time are you spending on there, and you all parents, they learn one way or another. We can learn from each other by learning from other relatives or other people, or even Googling things before you start, jumping into stuff like video games. Like, hey, what are some good tips about, kids with video games or computers and all that stuff? So I learned on my own, like I said earlier. First, I didn't know what I was doing. And then I realized that, what? His chores are not getting done, and I didn't want him sitting there all day long, especially if there was no school. Of course, at this point in his life, he had to finish off his schooling at a WorkSource solution to finish him off because I couldn't stay home and educate him because I had to work. So he was at his, like right at the high school area, of ending. And so that's all they had to do is finish him off where I left him off. And they were amazed. I didn't have my GED, never graduated, and they were super amazed with how well-mannered my son was, and his grades as far as homeschooling and doing it on the computer. So if I could do it, ladies and, fathers and mothers, you could do it, So they do have programs out there, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. So during those years, that's, my son was very faithful, went to, do the schooling in the morning until the afternoon. Later on, he ended up getting a job, for a nursery, for plants. And they weren't really giving him the money that he deserved, but he was working at least. And so, you know what? I had a son and mother time with him because I realized, I would come home, work my ass off, and come home, and things weren't being taken care of. I was really, it added a lot of pressure to me as a mom. I wanted things picked up and cleaned up. And so you really want to start off right in the beginning, but that doesn't always happen. Like in my case, it didn't happen that way. I learned, and I learned quick, because I didn't want a child just sitting and loafing around the house all day long. And because Starlight loved going out hiking, my son really, surprising being how I am, my son was not really the outdoorsy type somehow or another. Even though we went camping when he was younger, even though we did go on hikes, he was more of a stay-at-home son. And it probably was the video games that really got him like this. So there are negative things about video games where, they get sucked in, that they don't want to go out and play, And so I learned on my own with my son is, because when he was younger, he must have gone on video games. Somewhere around his time, though, is that I realized I'm like, hey, I said son. I'm not gonna say his name, but I'm like, we got to go and do something. And I'll tell you what, he didn't want to go and do something. I was getting an attitude from him, and my son was really such a super son. So I love him. He was an excellent son. He made my life stress-free. Really, he was anybody would love a son like mine. And so I was getting an attitude, and I didn't deserve that attitude. So I had to buckle things up quick. You really got to notice the signs. But what happens in society with a lot of people these days is that people are so distracted, they're too busy, they don't take the time out to do what they really need to do as far as handling a situation like this with a video game right away. These are, and I went through some hardcore training at church as far as being a mom, being a wife. I learned a lot of stuff, as far as obedience. It was like when you tell your son or daughter that they're supposed to obey right away. And I'll tell you what, it's a good thing to do that, because you really want your kids to obey right away. It's a good rule. It really is a good rule, because they're going to play head games. They're going to test the boundaries out, and every child will do that. They're going to, like, hey, we got to get going, oh, they're still playing. So I'm like, okay, you got 10 more minutes, and sometimes when kids are younger, they don't know what 10 minutes is, so then I had to do the countdown, when he was younger. And I know he played video games when he was younger, but what ended up happening is that his attitude, his personality, and everything changed, where he started looking fat. It's like, what's up with this? I mean, like, it's kind of weird because he wasn't fat. It's just that he was so sucked into the video games that it was changing him in a negative way. So that's what you got to watch out for, is when their behavior starts changing, and now they're not the sweetheart, the sweet son, or the daughter, because girls play video games too. But when you start noticing those behaviors, you better really get on your stuff with your children, because they're going to test it to the core. And I just witnessed this the other day, and Starlight did a little trick. I wanted to see if it was going to work. Okay, Starlight is back. I got a little distracted in the middle of my video, and so what I did at the library is that this boy kept on testing his father about getting off the computer. And so I was waiting for his dad to come back again at the computer, because the dad is using a calm, relaxed voice. He was doing a really great job as far as that goes. He wasn't over using his voice, in the library. And sometimes, though, we do need to use that firm voice with our children to let them know, I mean business right now. So the father comes back, this is after like about 3 times the dad is trying to get his son off the computer at the library. And this son here was turning into a monster. I mean, like, really bad, because it's getting out of control. The son is winning, the parents are not, and that is what was going on. This child his voice changed and his tone changed, and I was like, holy shit! I didn't want to even look over there because I was just trying to focus on what I was doing. But I said, I'm gonna test something out, because this kid was really testing his dad out and would turn into a monster here and there, as the dad was, really kindly trying to get his son out, out of the library. And so what I decided to do is, once the dad got to the computer and the dad was saying, hey, this is the 3rd time doing this, we really, the dad already gave him extra time. It's 12 minutes later, extra. I'm just throwing that out there. It might have even been longer than that, because the dad disappeared and time was ticking, and that kid got extra time. He was getting his own way. And so I was waiting for the dad to come back, and then the dad was next to me, where I was on the computer. So I knew the dad was going to wrap things up, or try again to wrap things up with the son. So I decided to act like I'm actually ready to leave. So Starlight, I gotta see if I can do this, because Starlight does not sit on outside public things without protecting my skin from sitting on things. But I do have like a tarp that I'm sitting on because I've had my own chair out here. But so Starlight got out of her chair at the library, and I was acting like it was just an act. But it's the energy, what I was doing. I was using my energy, like, okay, I heard them. He was trying to get his son off the computer, so I get up out of my chair, and I did like a big stretch, and I acted like I was throwing my energy all over the place in there, acting like I am unplugging stuff, and I was spreading that energy out because all I wanted was this boy to obey his parent, his dad, And I'll tell you what, all the other times that kid disobeyed his father, and I believe what I did really did actually work, because by me spreading my energy, acting like I'm closing, like pulling the plugs out of my stuff, that kid actually, didn't give his dad a hard time. They actually got and left. It's so cool. So I just wanted to share that with you, is what I did, and I really believed it worked to get this child to obey his father, because it's like we're both kind of packing up at the same time. I was throwing that energy out that it's time to leave now. I didn't have to say anything, but that's what happened during that time at the library. I was at the library last night, and there was a couple kids, and the oldest one, he's about 8 years old. I'm going to say he's 8 years old, around that age. So he's on the computer. I don't know what he's doing on a computer. I'm assuming it's a video game. And his dad's like, I'm just going to make this up, you got 10 more minutes. And so the kid's like, doing his thing. I'm not really watching, but I'm there. I can kind of feel stuff on the side of me. And now the minutes are up. Bam! This kid is giving his dad a really rotten, horrible time. And that is the worst, is out in public. So you really want to, with your children, you want to really work on these problems at home. That way, if you do go out in public, like at a library, and they're, because people do this, they might have the children, play video games at the library. You really want to correct this matter at the house. Let them know, you're going to learn as you go, but if they give you a hard time out in public, when you get home, you better have a rule. You better scare the daylights out of you. You don't have to beat your children, but when you get home, or even in the car, you let them know right away, is I will not, let them know that you're the boss. They are not the boss. If you give them the power, to control this situation, and that goes with anything, and a big, huge mistake goes on with most parents. They try to scare their kids, and they try to make threats, but they don't follow through. They say all kinds of stuff to threaten the kid, and I'm saying threaten, and like you're gonna get spanked if you do that again. And then the kid just keeps on going. No, the kid didn't get spanked. This is gonna happen if you keep this up. See, parents I'm sorry, it's kind of the word lazy. They're busy the parents are busy doing something. They're not focused and concentrating on what's going on with the kids. They go off and this is exactly what was going on last night, is that the father disappeared, in the library somewhere, as the son was playing that video game. So the father comes back, and he's like, all right, wrap things up, we got to get going. And the kid is freaking out, and he's like, oh, hey, You know, it was like, I didn't even have, the time that you told me. And the father didn't correct the problem, you know? The father did not correct the problem. All he had to do is turn that computer off and we're going, you know? But you want to handle these problems at the house so then it doesn't end up being this scene out at the library where the children will know that, hey, I got you now because we're out in public and now I control your ass because you're not going to say anything, because parents get embarrassed out in public about talking to their kids because everybody's going to stare at you and think you're abusing your kids. So you really have to be straight with, no matter what you say in the house, no matter what you're talking to your kids about, if you do that one more time, this is going to happen, you got to follow through. You got to follow through. No ifs, ands, or buts. Once you put your guard down and you let them get away with it this time, they're going to test you the next time and the next time and the next time. So it's a biggest mistake. Biggest lesson that a parent's got to learn is if you say something, when God says something, God follows through. That's what kind of attitude you have to have with your kids. You've got to follow through. Don't make up stuff. Don't try to scare them. And don't follow through because you're creating a monster. You are definitely going to create a monster in no time. It will happen so quick. When you say you got 10 minutes, parents, you got to be there before that 10 minutes is up and say, that's it. There's no more a minute, another couple minutes. No, you said 10 minutes. It's got to be 10 minutes. Say, this is the time. You got to let them know, okay, what time is it right now? And I'm sorry, you've got to do this because they will play little head games with you. And if you aren't sharp and you're not, this is not the time to go, I'm going to be funny with you. It's not the time to go out, in the back room and smoke a joint, as you're, you're being challenged with your kids. That's how they end up going in the other room somewhere. And then, 10 minutes is already gone, it might even be 20 minutes later. And the child is like, wow, I know I got more than 10 minutes on this video game. You gotta be quick, and you gotta let these kids know at the house, if you don't clean your room, this is gonna happen. You gotta stick to it. You can't say, well, I'll let this slide. They are gonna ride your ass so hard. And and the younger ones are gonna, if you got younger kids, they're gonna learn everything that's going on with big brother or big sister. So it is harder on the bigger brother and bigger sister, but you gotta use them as an example. Like, when you control the oldest one, it's gonna, fizzle out, with the other ones. But if you don't get control of the oldest ones, the other ones are gonna follow suit, with what big brother and big sister is doing, because they're like, wow, I can't believe it. They're getting away with this. I'm going to try the same thing my big brother and big sister did because they got away with it. And I see that mom and dad are a pushover. And you can't be a pushover. And I got to be direct with you on this because it is that important to stay on your stuff. Don't say something unless you really, really, really mean it. Don't make all these threats that you're going to take this away and that away and you don't follow through. I want you home at this time. No, you got to be the one running in the house, because I'll tell you what, they learn at a very young age. It starts when they're young, is when they whine about all kinds of stuff, and you cave in. You don't follow through. You don't want to deal with the attitude. That's what happens to a lot of parents. They don't want to deal with the attitude because now you're actually saying, no, I'm the boss. You're the child. And when I say something, you need to listen. You need to obey. Because in the beginning, that's how you create monsters. Is because if you don't follow through, they will learn at a very young age that, they just make up stuff all the time and they never follow through. And it's because they don't want to deal with the attitude with the child. They don't want to Even like relationships go through the same thing. In relationships, a lot of people, they have problems in a relationship, but they don't want to communicate about it because they're afraid that they're going to have to deal with an attitude and somebody flipping out, and so instead of dealing with the problem and instead of communicating, they let it slide, and that creates a big huge mess in a relationship. Same thing with your children. You have 10 minutes left. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. You have the time, say, okay, write the time down on a piece of paper so they can actually see, okay, so say that the child's got to be done at 5 o'clock. Video game is done at 5 o'clock. Say it was like 10 of 5. You write that time down, and so say, okay, when it's 5 o'clock, that's it. We're unplugging. You gotta be strong. And that goes with anything, anything in the house. You've got to be strong. There might be some kind of, only like emergency stuff. That's the only thing. As an emergency of something hard, like whatever you're going through with your children, but they got to prove this stuff because you got to be on top of your stuff with them. You can't, that's why parenting, it's a lot. There's a lot involved as far as being a mom and being a dad, being parents. And on this note, very important, this is where a lot of families screw up as far as being parents and bringing up kids, is that, and even divided families, this whole thing. So mom cannot be the pushover and dad can't be the pushover. You both have to come together, and you both have to, if mom's a pushover, then the child is always gonna, it's gonna confuse the child. If it's 10 minutes, that means mom and dad, 10 minutes is 10 minutes. It's not just dad being the hard ass, or it's not just mom being the hard ass, because it always is different with every couple. Sometimes the dad's a pushover. Sometimes it's the mom is the pushover. You have to come together, and you have to say, what, when it comes to disciplining and correcting the child, you both have to be on the same page. And that even goes for really if there's other parents involved, because they're going to create a monster, even if you got step parents on the side somewhere with the children. You really have to come together and have like a family meeting and say, this is important for all of us to do this, because we're helping each other out, because the children are going to find the weakest one, and that is, and then they're going to give you an attitude. You're always, you say, hey, 10 minutes is 10 minutes. They go to the step parent's house, 10 minutes is a half hour to them, and then when they're at the house with you and you say 10 minutes, now they're freaking out because they get away with it at the step parent's house. Or it could be vice versa. It could be the real mom and dad, where somebody's just a pushover and they're letting their child get away with everything. Everybody's got to be on the same page to make this work, and it helps everybody out. And the kids, you got to have an agreement, with everyone. You got to kind of have that, it makes it easier for the child. It makes it easier for the parents that, that you come together, you get along as parents, and it's for everyone. It's not just for the child, it's for the parents. It's to make everybody's lives easier, but it takes a lot of hard work to do all that. That means, you've got to deal with the attitudes. You got to, and if you already goofed up and you haven't done it right from the beginning, this is a time. That doesn't mean that it's too late. You can have a family meeting at the table, mom, dad, and the kids at the table, and say, have a little bell, do something, hey, this is family meeting time. There's going to be rules changing in the house. And you've got to be smart, and you got to be honest with your children. Say, what, this has gone too far. We didn't know what we were doing, but now we got new rules in the house, and this is how we're going to do it. And you got to stick to your guns. You got to, because you don't want this to go through in their teen years, because you do that when they get up in the teen years. Wow, you're going to have your hands full. And the kids got all kinds of tricks, all kinds of little tricks, especially when you're The worst place for your kids is to be in the public school, because they can use the public school to blackmail your ass. I'm not kidding. They will if they got any little thing on you, they will use it to blackmail you. They will threaten you. These kids are not stupid. They really want something. They can even learn from their friends in school, what they do, and watch their behaviors. And that's why it's so important to make sure your kids don't get just dropped off at somebody else's house, and you don't, it's really best to have them come to your house. That way you get to really know, and you can weed out the weeds. If there's weeds coming to your house, this friend is no longer to come to our house. Why, Mom, Dad? Because it's our house. We've been watching this child, and I don't like the behavior of this child, and he's no longer allowed to come to the house. You're gonna find a different friend, because we cannot have this friend he's not a friend. He's a vampire. Vampire, my friend? Yeah, he's a vampire. Vampires are not allowed to come to our house. It's a lot of work. And that is where a lot of parents fail, is because they don't want to take the time. They're too busy doing something else, maybe on the internet, the computer, watching news, or, they got to take time out. No matter what you're doing, you got to take time out, stop what you're doing, correct the problem. And this is where it is a lot of work. But you know what? You will thank yourself later on when you did the work right from the beginning, instead of putting it off and not, just saying stuff and not following through, because your kids are super smart, and they learn this at a really young age. I don't want to say stories. I do have some stories, but I'm not going to bring those up. But I do know kids, they started off on the wrong foot with their parents, and I'm amazed, where there's times that I don't want to be around, because I'm like, oh my, they created a monster, and it's out of my hands. There's times that nobody wants to hear what you got to say, even though you have the right answers for them and to help them out. But not everybody wants help. So you have 10 minutes. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. I love you so much. I hope this really helps you out. And this goes for grandpas and grandmas. You want to help your kids out. Don't spoil them rotten. Don't give them everything. Hey, you know what? I just want to be the good guy. No, you're not being the good guy here. Good cop, bad cop. You need to be the bad cop. You need to be, I'm not saying bad as far as abusing your kids or your grandkids, but you gotta, it's not easy to be a hard parent. But it's necessary to let them know that they're not getting, I have to say, kind of have the chain on a short leash. You got that chain on a long leash, forget it. You're gonna have hell on your hands, with those kids. They're gonna drive you freaking bonkers, and whose fault will it be? It's not gonna be the child's fault, no, So anyway, I love you so much. This is Starlight. You have 10 minutes to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm just kidding. So anyway, I love you so much. This is Starlight, and namaste. This is Starlight, love, light, and peace. Thank you for watching. This is Starlight. Namaste. This is Starlight, love, light, and peace.